In the shadowed corners of Eldritch Hollow, a sinister force had woven its dark tapestry across the once peaceful town. The newcomer, Draven, with his obsidian black hair and eyes that seemed to pierce the soul, became the focus of whispered rumors and fearful glances. He arrived under the veil of night, taking residence in the dilapidated mansion at the edge of town, a place long avoided by the locals due to tales of cursed grounds and unspoken horrors. Draven's appearance was marked by an unsettling grace, his movements fluid and predatory. His skin, pale as moonlight, contrasted sharply against the dark attire he favored, making him a figure of both allure and terror. The townsfolk noticed that animals, particularly nocturnal ones, grew agitated in his presence, and an unexplained chill seemed to follow in his wake. "My skin crawls every time he passes by," murmured Lily, the owner of the local diner, as she peered through the fogged window one evening, watching Draven disappear into the mist. Her hands trembled slightly, the unease palpable in her voice. "Maybe he's just misunderstood," I offered, though my heart wasn't in it. The truth was, Draven's presence filled me with a dread I couldn't shake, a feeling that something fundamentally wrong had come to Eldritch Hollow. That night, the air was pierced by a scream that led to the discovery of the first victim. Drained of life, her body a pale husk abandoned in the woods. The police were baffled, the cause of death a mystery that left them grasping at straws. It wasn't long before another victim was found, and then another, each one more horrifying than the last. The town was gripped by fear, a palpable terror that turned neighbor against neighbor, and whispers of a vampiric presence began to circulate. Draven, with his nocturnal habits and enigmatic aura, became the prime suspect in the court of public opinion. One fateful night, emboldened by desperation and the desire to protect those I loved, I followed Draven into the heart of the forest. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow that barely penetrated the dense canopy. Draven moved with purpose, leading me to a clearing where the unimaginable unfolded before my eyes. A congregation of figures, their features shadowed and indistinct, gathered around an ancient stone altar. Draven stood at the forefront, his voice rising in an arcane chant that made my blood run cold. The air thickened, a palpable darkness swirling as if reality itself recoiled in horror. It was then I realized the true extent of the nightmare Eldritch Hollow had succumbed to. A cult, with Draven at its helm, dedicated to the worship of ancient, vampiric entities. I watched, hidden in the shadows, as they summoned forth a creature from the depths of nightmare, its form both mesmerizing and repulsive. The cultists, lost in fervor, offered themselves to it, seeking the dark gift of eternal life through the curse of vampirism. Draven, however, sought more than mere immortality. He craved power, dominion over life and death itself. The ritual concluded in a crescendo of eldritch energy that left me reeling, and I fled back to the safety of the town, my mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The knowledge of what I had witnessed burned within me, a dire warning of the darkness that had taken root in our midst. In the days that followed, Eldritch Hollow transformed. Those missing were found, changed, roaming the streets with a hunger that could not be satiated by normal means. Draven, no longer content to lurk in the shadows, revealed his true nature, proclaiming himself the herald of a new age. The town, once vibrant and full of life, became a place of shadows and whispers, where the night was filled with the terror of the undead and the day with the grief of those who had lost loved ones to the darkness. It was in this atmosphere of despair that I made my choice. Armed with knowledge gleaned from ancient texts and the desperate hope that Draven's reign could be ended, I gathered a group of survivors. each one driven by the desire to reclaim the night and restore peace to Eldritch Hollow. The final confrontation was inevitable, a clash between the light of human resilience and the abyssal darkness of Draven's ambition. As we faced him and his unholy congregation, the air crackled with the power of ancient magics, and the fate of Eldritch Hollow hung in the balance, a tale of courage and sacrifice in the face of utter darkness. Under the cloak of a storm-ridden night, with lightning cleaving the sky and thunder echoing like the drums of war, we made our stand at the heart of Eldritch Hollow, the abandoned church that now served as Draven's unholy sanctuary. The stained glass windows, once depicting scenes of sacred lore, were now obscured by darkness, as if the very light had forsaken this place. Our group, though small, was resolute, bound by a shared determination to either restore the soul of our town or perish in the attempt. We had armed ourselves with what little we could gather: stakes hewn from blessed wood, vials of holy water, and relics that pulsed with a light that seemed anathema to the shadows we faced. As we breached the entrance, the interior loomed before us, a cathedral of desolation where the pews were coated in dust and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Draven awaited us at the altar, flanked by his newly turned disciples, their eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. "You dare defy the will of the Ancient Ones?" Draven's voice was a blend of amusement and scorn, resonating within the hollowed halls. "You mere mortals cannot comprehend the power you challenge." It was then that the battle for Eldritch Hollow truly began. The storm outside mirrored our clash, a tempest of light and darkness. His disciples surged forward, a wave of snarling, inhuman fury. But we held our ground, our weapons not just tools of war, but symbols of our refusal to succumb to despair. Each fallen vampire was a testament to our resolve, even as our numbers dwindled. The holy water scorched them like acid, and the stakes found their mark, turning predators into dust. Yet with each victory, the weight of our losses grew heavier. Draven watched the chaos unfold with an air of detachment, as if we were but actors in a play he had seen too many times. It was only when we began to turn the tide, his ranks thinning, that he deigned to join the fray. His power was palpable, a suffocating miasma that seemed to drain the very courage from our hearts. But it was in this moment of despair that the true metal of Eldritch Hollow's defenders shone brightest. We rallied, driven by the memories of those we had lost and the hope of a dawn yet to come. The final confrontation was a blur of motion and emotion. Draven was a force of nature, his movements a blur, his strikes lethal. But for every blow he dealt, we responded with twice the ferocity, our spirits bolstered by the knowledge that this darkness could be defeated, must be defeated. In the end, it was a simple act of sacrifice that turned the tide. One among us, a young woman whose family had been among the first taken, charged at Draven with a stake, knowing full well the cost. Her act was not in vain, for it provided the opening we needed. As Draven dispatched her, his guard dropped for just a moment, but a moment was all it took. With a cry that was both a lament and a battle cry, I plunged my stake into Draven's heart. The effect was instantaneous. The storm above ceased its fury, the oppressive darkness lifted, and Draven, the nightmare that had haunted Eldritch Hollow, crumbled into ash. The battle was over, but its scars would mark us forever. We emerged from the church as dawn broke, the first light in weeks to grace our town. The survivors gathered in silence, a profound sense of loss mingled with the dawning realization that we had reclaimed our home from the shadows. In the weeks that followed, Eldritch Hollow began to heal. The vampires that had once preyed upon us were gone, their curse lifted with Draven's demise. We buried our dead with tears and reverence, vowing to remember their sacrifice. The town slowly returned to life, but it was a life forever changed. We had seen the darkness that lurked beyond the veil of the mundane, felt its cold embrace, and fought back with the light of our courage and our humanity. Eldritch Hollow would never forget the night it stood at the brink of oblivion and returned, not through the power of ancient magics or the will of the gods, but through the indomitable spirit of its people. Our tale became one of hope, a beacon to any who might one day face the darkness. A reminder that even in the deepest night, there is light to be found, if one only has the courage to seek it. As the weeks passed and Eldritch Hollow basked in its newfound peace, a subtle unease began to creep into the edges of our celebration. The town had survived, yes, and the threat of Draven and his vampiric cult was no more, but whispers of the cost of our victory began to circulate. The young woman who had sacrificed herself, the one who provided the distraction that led to Draven's downfall, became the focus of these murmurs. Her name was Evelyn, and though she had fallen in the church, her body was never recovered among the ashes of our foes. As autumn waned and the leaves turned to gold, a peculiar phenomenon unsettled the town. Animals once again grew restless, but only under the light of the full moon. And in that silvery glow, some reported seeing a figure at the edge of the woods. A woman, they said, with hair like the midnight sky and eyes that reflected the moonlight. I refused to believe the rumors at first, dismissing them as the product of overactive imaginations, still traumatized by the recent horrors. But as the full moon approached once more, curiosity and an unspoken fear drove me to the edge of the woods, to the very spot where Evelyn was said to appear. There, under the boughs of ancient trees, I saw her. Evelyn stood before me, not as the fallen martyr we had mourned, but as something else, something other. Her eyes, once warm and vibrant, now held the depth of the night sky, and where there should have been the beat of life, there was only a chilling stillness. Evelyn? My voice was barely a whisper, disbelief warring with the evidence before my eyes. She smiled, a gesture both beautiful and terrifying as she stepped into the moonlight. "You defeated Draven," she said, her voice a melody that seemed to echo with the whisper of leaves. "But in doing so, you unleashed something else, something that even he feared." I took a step back, my heart racing. "What are you talking about? What did we unleash?" "The Ancient Ones, the true masters of the night. They sought a conduit, a being through which they could exert their will. Draven believed he could control their power, but he was merely a puppet." Her gaze was unyielding, a mirror to the abyss. "In destroying him, you freed them from their bonds, and they chose a new vessel." Understanding dawned on me, cold and inexorable. "You," I breathed. "They chose you." She nodded, her expression one of sorrow and inevitability. "I am their herald now, bound to the darkness yet apart from it. I exist between worlds, tasked with preparing the way for their return." The implications of her words were a maelstrom, threatening to drown me in despair. "What does that mean for us? For Eldritch Hollow?" Evelyn's gaze softened. "It means that the battle was not the end, but the beginning. The Ancient One's power grows, and with it, the shadow that will fall over this world. Eldritch Hollow will be the first, but not the last." The weight of her declaration was a shroud that settled over me, heavy and suffocating. In our victory over Draven, we had unwittingly opened the door to a far greater darkness, one that would not be so easily overcome. As she faded back into the shadows of the woods, leaving me alone under the baleful gaze of the moon, I realized the true nature of our plight. Eldritch Hollow, once a beacon of triumph against the darkness, now stood on the precipice of a deeper, more consuming night. The tale of our town was not one of victory, but of a warning, a cautionary tale of the cost of meddling with powers beyond our understanding. And as I made my way back to the sleeping town, the weight of our unintended legacy heavy on my heart, I knew that the light we had fought so hard to preserve was but a flicker against the coming storm. Thank you for listening to Creepy Vibes.